All right, everyone. It is time for the last presentation of day one. You all know him from Pro 777 Radio and Secrets of Saturn. So welcome, Jason Lindgren.
Anybody want to see a presentation? There we go. All right. So if you guys know who I am, my name's Jason. I'm from the Pro 777 Radio Show. A lot of the topics that we normally cover are pretty heavy. I want to do something a little lighter, even though the information is still going to be there. Just to mix it up, do something a little different, which is also why I wanted to wander around and just kind of take this one a little different than I used. So, the ufology movement, and that's not a typo. And I'm not going to claim that name. I got that from the late William Cooper, which I think is perfectly apt because many people are indeed fooled. So, let's start off with saying that the majority of the information regarding UFOs and extraterrestrials that is released for public consumption is, in my mind, and a lot of people do feel this way, is for social engineering purposes of one sort or another. There have been allegations made that by injecting the notion of aliens from other worlds that have and still are visiting the Earth, it would make things much easier for the creation of a world government or the New World Order, or now they're calling it the Great Reset, which is just new lipstick on an old pig, really. But a world government for all of mankind, or at least a small percentage of it that they haven't bumped off yet. So think of this whole thing as an us, the humanity, against them, the aliens sort of mentality. The alien concept is also used, as I'm sure many of you are aware, year after year as a money-making scheme for a lot of individuals who release books, podcasts, videos, do lectures, all that kind of stuff. I think we all have seen plenty of that stuff, right? Not to mention professional movies made and all that kind of stuff. So, one of the earliest mentions of this whole alien thing goes all the way back to 1917 with a dude named John Dewey. To quote him, someone remarked that the best way to unite all the nations on this globe would be an attack from some other planet. In the face of such an alien enemy, people would respond with a sense of their unity of interest and purpose. We have the next thing to that at the present time. Now, when you think about 1917, we're talking the World War I era. Before a common menace, North and South America, the Occident and Orient have done an unheard of thing, a wonderful thing, a thing which, it may well be, future history will point to as the most significant thing in these days of wonderful happenings. Well, here we are 105 years later. I don't know about that. They have joined forces amply and intimately in a common cause with one another and with the European nations which were most directly threatened. What a few dreamers hoped might happen in the course of some slow coming century has become an accomplished fact in a few swift years. In spite of geographical distance, unlike speech, diverse religion, and hitherto independent aims, notions from every continent have formed what for the time being is nothing less than a world state, an immense cooperative action in behalf of civilization. Now, I know that was a little wordy, but these people, just to prove to you that they've been, again, 105 years ago, forget the alien thing for a second, they were on this New World Order, world government crap back then. I could do a whole presentation just how many times they talk about that stuff. So obviously this guy was somewhere on the ladder of elite scumbags. Anybody recognize this guy? I actually really like him. He's very entertaining. And even though the image is very funny, it has a very interesting social engineering consequence. Now, when you do a professional level movie, TV show, whatever it happens to be, there's pretty much going to be millions of dollars involved at that point. There's no way, Giorgio Tsoukalos, that's his name, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right or not, there's no way a producer's looked at his hair and said, don't do that. That was clearly intentional to make him look goofy as hell. And you gotta wonder why. So let's talk about the concept of ancient aliens, because this is... they make so much money off this crap. Ancient aliens. The notion that the Earth had one or more highly technological alien species, assumedly from another world, visiting and influencing humans at the dawn of civilization. The company that makes these, a lot of these things for History Channel, is called Prometheus Entertainment. And they make a lot of these programs. I don't know if the show is still on, but it did run for years if it's not anymore. Like there's season after season after season and variations on these different concepts. So the main figure is, of course, like I said, George Tsoukalos, who's quite an interesting individual to say the least. Now this guy has been involved in the entertainment business for the majority of his life. So doing this kind of thing, he did a lot of sports, Paul, I think early in his life, if I remember correctly. And again, I just want you to think for a moment, this guy's going on camera and being seen by literally millions of people. So this just wasn't like he rolled out of bed and decided to throw a bunch of gel in his hair. Like he clearly is there for a purpose to look ridiculous for a reason. At least that's the way I see it. Don't know if you guys agree. I think it's kind of obvious, but it is what it is. By the way, Prometheus Entertainment, I'm glad I asked Crow to remind me about this before I came. When Crow first started getting known for all his telescope footage early on, I think we're almost going on 10 years at this point, people from Prometheus Entertainment approached him and they wanted to do Crow's goofy haircut show. And they started talking to him about what they wanted to do, what they were offering financially, and the contracts involved were just above and beyond ridiculous because they literally own everything for pennies on the second, if I remember what he told me correctly. So, Crow said when he was reading through this contract, nobody would ever sign this. And the guy just told him, you have no idea what people will sign. So just to give you a real old example of somebody you all probably know of, that's how little people will sell themselves out to be in the public spotlight. And of course, Crow would have none of it, so. All right. Anybody recognize this guy?
Grandpa!
Colonel Sanders, that's what I thought. I was like, he's the guy with the chicken. Close. Still falling under the category of ancient aliens, we must, of course, have a mention of the many mistranslations of Zacharias Sitchin. I always mispronounce his name, who cares? Sitchin claims to have translated ancient Sumerian texts that informed him that humanity exists as it does today due to the intervention of alien entities. Of course, what else would it be? This has been disputed by others with credentials in ancient languages. They have pointed out that he was wrong in numerous places, but of course, this didn't stop Sitchin from selling millions of books before he passed away in 2010, and he had more than one. He had numerous bestsellers. Interesting if you like what, in my opinion, I call science fiction. Okay, so we're moving along in the history here, up into the 1930s. The War of the Worlds radio drama was an episode of the American radio drama anthology series by the Mercury Theater. Wait for it, Mercury Theater. Why'd they choose that name? Things to think about. The Mercury Theater on the Air. It was performed as a Halloween episode of the series on October 30th, 1938. And it aired over, wait for it, the Columbia Broadcasting System. These names are not chosen by accident in any way, shape, or form. The Columbia Broadcasting System is more commonly known as CBS, by the way, in case you didn't know. And if you watch any CBS program, you'll see in the bottom corner, I think it's the right corner, maybe it's the left, I don't remember, I don't watch TV anymore. But you'll see their little all-seeing eye logo. So there's your Columbia Broadcasting. Yay. The episode was directed and narrated by actor and future filmmaker Orson Welles. And the episode was an adaptation of H.G. Wells' novel, The War of the Worlds, that came out in 1898. The first 2/3 of the 60-minute broadcast were presented as a series of simulated news bulletins, which suggested to many listeners that an actual alien invasion by Martians was actually happening right then and there. Do you think anyone else might agree with me that a lot of things that are on the news these days aren't exactly reality? Yeah, talk about simulated news bulletins. I think we've seen a lot of that the past couple of years, right? So let's talk about H.G. Wells. We've done shows on this dude. We've mentioned him numerous times. H.G. Wells is a known elitist globalist scumbag. In 1940, his book, The New World Order, what a great title, came out, and in the book, Wells proposed a framework of international functionalism that could guide the world towards achieving world peace under, of course, an elitist dictatorship. To achieve this goal, Wells asserted that a socialist, always socialist, and scientifically planned world government would need to be formed, quote, to defend human rights. Now, that was 1940. How many of you see over and over and over again this massive push for socialism today? So they keep doing this stuff, and they've been trying to do this stuff for literally decades at this point. Now, socialism, just to get a little political for a second, but not really. Socialism, communism, and fascism all dance in the same circles because they literally end up just being dictatorships. All you have to do is look at China to know what happens when you're under one of these regimes. And I'm sure enough of you know enough history to know that any of those systems is bad news. But that's what these guys want, because then they have, for the most part, absolute control over the population. Except now they're trying to do it in super clever ways. They're trying to do it in digital ways. And if you look into it, it doesn't take much to find this stuff out. The way they're trying to do things these days with socialism and all that, it's going to be a small elite of transhumanists, that's the newer part of it, that are going to be on top, and they get all the fancy Star Trek toys to play with. And the rest of you are under a digital noose with a one universal digital passport with your currency and your vaccine status and all the other things tied into it. Your electric car will be tied into that because, as I'm sure you've noticed, huge push for electric cars. That's because everything that's electric or digital can be externally controlled, and that's exactly what they're doing. This whole Internet of Things, Internet of Bodies, all this crap that they're pushing is for control. And that's that. And I hope everybody is wise enough to realize how bad this crap is. They know. So the one thing I keep telling people of late, since I've become closer to the community, is people like the bear community that Owen Benjamin has done a magnificent job of helping to inspire, to get back to nature, take care of yourself, but have a community of like-minded individuals. It doesn't necessarily have to be specifically the bear community, but that kind of mentality is what we need. We need less digital and more dirt. So my hat's off to Owen Benjamin. I am so proud of the work he's done. I just spent a week last week helping run sound for their first Beartaria, was the actual name, but Beartaria Times Meetup, I think is what they called it. And I was so proud of these people. Every single one of them was cool as hell. And they're all following this mentality. I've never been around a group of people who just were so down to earth. And so they're just great. They're great people, and they know what's up. So I've been trying my best to just let people know, if you don't know about the bear community and what Owen's trying to help get out there, check it out, please. All right, let's move along with our Martians. I love the Martians. Compounding the issue was the fact that the Mercury Theater on the Air ran without commercial breaks, which added to the program's realistic nature. Now, is anyone stupid enough to think that they wouldn't want to make money off their commercials? Like, clearly this is a setup, in my opinion. Commercials are how radio stations and TV stations and now your streaming services, because they can't pull in enough money, they're starting to put commercials on there with all their garbage programming too. Although there were sensationalist accounts in the press about a supposed panic in response to the broadcast, the precise extent of listener response has been debated. Depends upon which idiot you ask, because there was a response. In the days following the adaptation, however, there was widespread outrage and panic by certain listeners who had believed the events described in the program were real. And a lot of people did. The program's news bulletin format was described as cruelly deceptive by some newspapers and public figures, leading to an outcry against the perpetrators of the broadcast. Despite these complaints, the episode secured Welles' fame as a dramatist, and Orson Welles went on to be a huge name in the entertainment industry. Granted, he is really good at what he did. So, as it turns out, oh my God, it was a psyop. Who would have thought? It would seem that the broadcast was actually a psychological warfare experiment conducted by the Princeton Radio Project. And I don't mean I'm speculating with a crazy conspiracy theory. I'm talking, they admitted it. The Rockefeller Foundation. Oh, there's the fun people again. The Rockefellers, they have their freaking dirty paws in everything. The Rockefeller Foundation funded the project in the fall of 1937. An Office of Radio Research was set up with Paul F. Lazarsfeld as director, with Frank Stanton and Hadley Cantrell named as associate directors. Cantrell used a special grant from the General Education Board to study the effects of the broadcast. Cantrell published the study as a book titled The Invasion from Mars, A Study in the Psychology of Panic. The book contains a complete script of the broadcast and is one of a series of studies sponsored by the Federal Radio Education Committee. So they know what was up, they know what was going on, and how, hey, this thing seemed really real to a lot of people. So that means if we tell them something and they accept it as coming from a legitimate source, which at the time was the quote-unquote news, a certain segment of the population is going to believe it. What do you think that they've been doing the last couple of years, huh? Too many people believe that crap. All right, let's move along to World War II. And there are a lot of reports of mysterious aerial phenomena by the Allied aircraft pilots in both the European and Pacific theaters. It later turned out that German and Japanese pilots were reporting such things as well. The term Foo Fighter was initially used by the Allies to name the phenomenon, which is where Dingleberry from Nirvana, what's his name, Dave Grohl, took the name for his mediocre band from. The term eventually stuck, and it came to be used for a variety of fast-moving, round, glowing objects that followed their aircraft. Various descriptions were used, excuse me, my voice is not in the best shape right now, were used as fiery, glowing red, white, or orange. Some described them as resembling Christmas tree lights and reported that they seemed to toy with the aircraft, making wild turns before simply vanishing. Of course, this will have a great resemblance to later descriptions of all the funny little flying saucers craft that make impossible right turns and speeding off at incredible paces. Which brings us to, why is that not loading? There we go. So this is the first of the actual flying saucer kind of things, and this guy supposedly had intelligence ties. Now, just like so many things that have massive social consequences, you always find out that a lot of the key players have intelligence ties in one way, shape, or form. Great example is one of my favorite subjects, which is the 1960s. And when you look at stuff from the Laurel Canyon area in Los Angeles, California, you find out that just about every rock star, just to use a very easy example that most people have heard of, all these rock stars had direct intelligence ties in their families or were in the military themselves. And nearly the entirety of the 1960s counterculture movement, I can't say that it didn't grow organically, but it was instigated on purpose by, take your pick of what you want to call them, but it was definitely, there was CIA stuff involved with the whole LSD thing. There's just intelligence fingerprints all over everything. And in my opinion, this really isn't any different. So the Kenneth Arnold sighting of June 24th, 1947, is the first actual report of flying saucers. This is considered the first of the modern era of UFO reporting. Arnold claims, after seeing flashes of light outside his window while flying his Pal Air A2 aircraft over Mineral, Washington, that he witnessed 9 shiny, thin craft flying together. He compared their movement to saucers skipping on water, and their shape being saucer, disc, pie pan, or half moon-like. He later said that one craft differed from the saucer look by being a crescent shape. This was the first post-World War II sighting in the United States that garnered nationwide news coverage and is credited as being the first of the modern era of UFO sightings, including numerous reported sightings over the next several weeks. Now, the interesting thing about things like newspapers and anything news related, we did a very interesting show a few years ago on how the news actually works. And we actually had somebody who was an insider for one of they're called news wires, is a general term for them. There's PR news wire, business wire, and things like that. The way most newspapers, anything really, any kind of news station, the way they get the majority of their news, other than like local crap about the local pet bunny got away, it's all being disseminated from the top down. And today it's super easy because everything's digital, but even way back when, stuff was still being disseminated out from the top down. So if they wanted a particular report put out, it got out. And as official news sources, they reported on it. So if a narrative is want to be put out into the general public, the capability to do that has been in place for decades and decades. And that's really important to know. Okay, now let's get to the fun stuff. We move on to the Roswell incident, which effectively began after the 4th of July holiday weekend in 1947. A rancher by the name of William McBrazel reported to the local sheriff, George Wilcox, that he might have recovered the remains of, quote, one of them flying saucers. Wilcox, according to various accounts, then contacted military authorities at nearby Roswell Army Airfield, where Major Jesse Marcel was assigned to investigate. Marcel and 2 counterintelligence corps agents, Sheridan Cavett and Lewis Rickett, drove out to the ranch where Brazel worked to examine and collect the wreckage. On July 8th, 1947, the Public Information Office at Roswell, AAF, made the startling announcement that they had recovered the remains of a flying disc. Now, this is one of the official photos. There's no way in hell anyone is stupid enough to think that's part of the remains of a flying disc, but that was an official photo that went out. That's clearly part of probably a weather balloon or something like that. So, take it as you will. By the next day, however, the excitement was over. Brigadier General Roger Ramey, who had ordered the wreckage sent to him for examination at Carswell Air Force Base, also known as Fort Worth, held a press conference with Major Marcel present and announced that the flying disc was merely a weather balloon. With Ramey's deflating announcement, the Roswell flying saucer story was effectively dead and would remain so for decades until this fun guy came around. I like him. In 1978, UFO researcher Stanton T. Friedman happened to meet Marcel. Because Marcel dredged up his recovered saucer story, and Friedman thought he had at last found a star witness who could blow open the US government's alleged cover-up of crash saucers and pickled aliens. The Roswell myth began anew with Friedman as his most outspoken figurehead, and of course, he had many books. Sold quite a few over the years. I'll get more into some of the other figures in the UFO movement, and to be fair, I don't know any of these people. He passed away a few years ago. I'll never meet him. And he seems like a very nice guy. However, you never know what to make of these people. Maybe they really just are into this UFO stuff, or maybe they had a sighting of their own. People do have sightings of strange stuff. I'm not going to say they don't. But here's the thing about Stanton T. Friedman. He claims to have been a nuclear physicist for 14 years before leaving the profession in 1970 to pursue the scientific investigation of UFOs. And you'll see him as not the only person who leaves what is supposed to be a high-paying job to go talk about UFOs. I don't know what kind of money's in that. Maybe that's why they write books. Friedman would go on to give numerous lectures, be on plenty of chat shows, contribute to multiple books, and be a very public voice for the reality of what he liked to call flying saucers. Stanton T. Friedman would normally end every lecture, think about this for a moment, with an appeal for world government, which he justified by asking, Who speaks for planet Earth? Argentina. So here again, we have a guy who's worried about little green men, yet he always pushed for world government. Now, that doesn't prove anything, but to me, that stinks really bad. What do you think? Stinky. All right, Project Blue Book. This is one that a lot of people have heard of. This was the code name for the systematic study of unidentified flying objects by the United States Air Force from March of 1952 until its official termination on December 17th, 1969. The project, that was headquartered at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, was initially directed by Captain Edward E. Ruppelt and followed projects of a similar nature, such as Project Sign, established in 1947, and Project Grudge in 1948. Project Blue Book had two stated goals: to determine if UFOs were a threat to national security, and to scientifically analyze UFO-related data. So this guy became the public face of it way back when, and yeah, he's the one that pushed all the swamp gas stuff and all that stuff early on. Astronomer Dr. J. Allen Hynek was the scientific consultant for Project Blue Book. He had also been with the previous projects, Sign and Grudge. He worked for the project up to its termination and initially created the characterizations, which were later extended, known as Close Encounters. So, Close Encounters, anybody ever heard of a movie called Close Encounters of the Third Kind? Huge blockbuster in 1977 by Steven Spielberg. He did a cameo in it at the end when the big mothership comes down. Like, not just as an actor playing him, actually him. So again, you're seeing Hollywood mixing with the military-industrial complex. Funny how that seems to happen a lot. He was a pronounced skeptic when he first started his investigations, but said that his feelings had changed to a more wavering skepticism during the research after encountering a minority of UFO reports he thought were unexplainable. Okay, so this notion of flying saucers was really into the public mindset by even the 1950s. Interesting. So the Brookings Institution, this is a policy think tank in Washington, D.C. It was founded in 1916 as the Institute for Government Research. The institution has produced thousands of reports in its lifetime, but the report that is so often misrepresented in the UFO community is the 1960 paper, Proposed Studies on the Implications of Peaceful Space Activities for Human Affairs. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because a lot of the big figures in the ufology movement, as they generally call it, they love to take things and, just like so many people do with so many things, they cherry pick. And they're like, see, they're talking about aliens. See, they admit this. So, I don't like people being disingenuous. We have enough problems trying to figure things out already, don't we? In the most interesting section of the report, the authors contemplated the possibility that contact might be made with extraterrestrial intelligence. They warned that this might not be an unmitigated cause for celebration. Anthropological files contain many examples of societies sure of their place in the universe, which have disintegrated when they have had to associate with previously unfamiliar societies espousing different ideas in different life ways. Others that survived such an experience usually did so by paying the price of changes in values and attitudes and behavior, and that is very, very true. You can look that one up in mainstream history. It has been speculated that, of all groups, scientists and engineers might be the most devastated by the discovery of relatively superior creatures, since these professions are most clearly associated with the mastery of nature rather than with the understanding and expression of man. Advanced understanding of nature might vitiate all our theory, at the very least, if not also require a cultural and perhaps a brain inaccessible to Earth scientists. However, they looked on the bright side as well. The knowledge that life existed in other parts of the universe might lead to a greater unity of men on Earth based on the oneness of man, or on the age-old assumption that any stranger is threatening. Much would depend on what, if anything, was communicated between man and the other beings. And the only thing I really have to say about that let's just say that the mainstream astronomical model is true, which obviously we're all questioning that, right? If some kind of being could come here from another star system, which is the general claim with all of this, their technology would be so far ahead of us. I mean, it's laughable. We couldn't do a thing to them if that was true, and I really doubt that it is. Okay, let's move along to MUFON. The Mutual UFO Network is a US-based nonprofit organization composed of civilian volunteers who study reported UFO sightings. It is one of the oldest and largest organizations of its kind, claiming more than 4,000 members worldwide with chapters and representatives in more than 43 countries and all 50 states. MUFON Incorporated was originally established as the Midwest UFO Network on 31st May 1969 in Quincy, Illinois. Most of MUFON's early members were associated with the Skylook newsletter of Dover, Missouri, and the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, formerly of Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin. MUFON was renamed the Mutual UFO Network in 1973 because of its expansion to other states and countries. Now, the one thing you could probably find very easily if you ever looked up stuff on MUFON is that this thing has been infiltrated by intelligence agents for decades. I remember Crow telling me a story also about MUFON that I don't remember the details of, but sketchy as all hell is basically what it comes down to. Okay, now we get to our first fun abduction story. The Betty and Barney Hill abduction incident is the introduction of the Zeta Reticuli meme and is the first widely publicized report of a UFO abduction. They were an American couple who claimed to be abducted from a rural part of New Hampshire from September 19th to 20th of 1961. This incident introduces a lot of the concepts that will be repeated later, such as memory blockages, medical examinations, missing time, and seeing unusual things aboard the supposed spacecraft. Betty would draw a star map of what she says she saw while on board the craft. This is how at least certain aliens are supposed to come from the double star system of Zeta Reticuli. Now, I've looked at the actual write-ups on this particular report, and it's not the typical little grays, although what happens so often is that things just get all mishmashed together and it just goes under one umbrella, and all of a sudden the grays are one of the prominent alien species visiting this planet. Well, that's not how they describe them. They describe them with caps on and short black hair. Now, I'm pretty sure everybody knows what I'm talking about when I'm saying an alien gray. They're generally described in two ways. One is the little hobbit-sized ones, big eyes and they're no hair. And then there's taller ones that are tall and slim and look kind of the same. And both of those were actually shown in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, if you've seen that movie, that they were properly represented. Okay. For decades, Hollywood has been doing its part to make sure that the concept of flying saucers and alien visitors from another world never disappears from public thought. The 1950s saw an incredible amount of films being released that involved flying saucers in one way or another. As the decades progressed, many of these sort of films would become more sophisticated, although the messaging remained the same. Yeah, I think everybody here knows that Hollywood is there for one thing and one thing only, and that is to skew the social mind. Here's some great examples, though. The Day the Earth Stood Still, that was released in 1951. So 1951, that's only 4 years after the supposed Roswell and the Kenneth Arnold sighting. So it didn't take them long to really start pumping up this stuff. And there was stuff earlier than this. It's one of the better examples of an old school flying saucer movie. It had a reasonable budget to not come off as a B flick, and decent enough plot based on an earlier story that had been written in 1940, and it had pretty decent professional acting. Producer Julian Blostein said that the movie advocated for wait for it, a stronger United Nations. What is the United Nations? The public face for world government. As, of course, the nuclear arms race heated up, and if you've ever listened to our show, Crow 7 Radio, you know that we challenge the validity of nuclear weapons. So, easy to scare people when you have something as terrifying as the concept of being able to blow up an entire city with a push of a button. which might be poppycock. The Day the Earth Stood Still was awarded the now retired Golden Globe for promoting international understanding. Funny enough, the title itself could even be looked at as a pun. The Day the Earth Stood Still. Great title. So here, just to show you the power of H.G. Wells' book from 1898 of War of the Worlds, every single one of these is a different program, movie, film, TV show, video game, whatever, made of War of the Worlds, and that's not all of them. I just picked the ones that had prettier pictures to show you. So they've mined this concept of alien invasion, usually from Mars, but I think some of them twisted the concept a little bit, coming to take over the world and wiping you out. Man, they just love this crap. All right, in 1977, Steven Spielberg released his blockbuster film, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. This film hit on all the major points of the ufology movement. The movie is noted for its attention to details from reported UFO sightings and encounters, as well as the people who study them. The movie's title refers to the most extreme of the UFO encounter categories that were defined by Dr. J. Allen Hynek in his research. Loosely defined, the first kind is a sighting in the sky. The second kind is a case in which physical traces can be noted. And the third kind is some sort of contact with the bug-eyed monsters. Now here's a guy who actually pisses me off. I don't know if you know who this guy is, but yeah, I don't like fraudsters. I really don't like fraudsters. Billy Meyer is the founder of a UFO religion called the Free Community of Interest for the Border in Spiritual Sciences and UFO Studies. He is an alleged alien contactee whose UFO photographs are claimed to show alien spacecraft, which were trash cans. Mayer claims to be in regular contact with extraterrestrial beings that he calls the Pleiarans. I might be mispronouncing that, who cares? He also presented other material during the 1970s, such as metal samples, sound recordings, and film footage. Meyer makes grandiose claims, because it's not just about aliens, oh no. It's also about him. He's a reincarnated prophet. And he has been widely characterized as a fraud by skeptics and ufologists who suggest that he used models to hoax photos that claim to show alien spacecraft. And you know what? That's exactly what this prick did. Billy Meyer is a supreme shyster. He literally created a cult of flying saucers with many gullible suckers flocking to him over the years. People who have looked into his photo evidence found that a lot of the spacecraft pictures were clearly made from items he had on hand, like garbage can lids. Unbelievable. He would fake his supposed aliens as well, taking shots of women off of a television screen, for example, to show just how much of a money grabber this guy is. He sued the X-Files television show back in the 90s when it was first beginning for using one of his images on a poster in Fox Mulder's office. It's the one that said, "I want to believe," I think was what it said. The poster was changed shortly afterwards to a similar one that was not from any of Meyer's photo releases. So, in other words, all you have here is a guy who made up a bunch of crap to try and make a bunch of money. That's why it's called the ufology movement. Okay. Communion, A True Story, is a book written by American ufologist and horror author Whitley Strieber. Strieber? Maybe Strieber. It was first published in February of 1987. The book is based on the claimed experiences of Whitley Strieber, who experienced lost time and terrifying flashbacks, which hypnosis undertaken by another well-known figure in ufology, Bud Hopkins, later linked to an alleged encounter with aliens. Communion was a nonfiction bestseller for 6 months in 1987. Whitley Strieber is also a talk show host and had a long association with the master of all of this stuff, talk show host Art Bell. By the way, not to be rude, but this is the guy who put out the notion of alien probes in your buttocks. Yeah, he started that. And this guy did a lot of stuff for the UFO community. Bud Hopkins was a nationally known abstract expressionist painter with works in the collections of the Guggenheim, Whitney, and Metropolitan Museums, as well as Boston's Museum of Fine Arts and New York's Museum of Modern Art. He also spent more than 30 years investigating UFO reports and was considered the world expert on UFO abduction. He authored 4 seminal books on the subject, including Missing Time and the New York Times bestseller Intruders, which was the subject of a CBS miniseries. And I'm not trying to be rude to anybody who writes books, but it seems like every one of these guys puts out books and makes tons of money. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I actually respect being able to write a book and all that kind of thing. But it seems to just be like, oh, I'm going to talk about something I can't prove in any way, shape, or form, write a book, and sell millions. Yeah. Among the personal or professional relationships he has written about during his lifetime were with such figures as the astronomers Carl Sagan and J. Allen Hynek, the philanthropist Lawrence Rockefeller. Rockefeller again. Get their paws in everything, don't they? Even the space aliens. And the Harvard psychiatrist John Mack. So, I hate making blanket statements, but anytime you see a Rockefeller involved, I mean, we know what we're talking about here, right? On May 31st, 1987, it was publicly reported that British ufologist Timothy Good claimed to be in possession of 1950s-era documents relating, of course, to aliens and UFOs. The documents reported to reveal a secret committee of 12. One of those numbers, right? Supposedly authorized by the United States President Harry S. Truman in 1952. The documents explained how the crash of an alien spacecraft at Roswell in July of 1947 had been concealed, how the recovered alien technology could be exploited, and how the United States should engage with extraterrestrial life in the future. According to the story, ufologist Jamie Shandera had, in 1984, received an envelope containing film, which, when developed, showed images of 8 pages of documents that appeared to be briefing papers describing Operation Majestic 12. And all you have to do is look into this stuff a little bit, and you find out that this is all frickin' nonsense. But a lot of people will hang their hat on and say, see, declassified documents or secret documents talking about aliens and UFOs. Roswell really happened. With no freaking proof, as always. Old Ronnie. In our obsession with antagonisms of the moment, we often forget how much unites all the members of humanity. Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us realize this common bond. I occasionally think how quickly our differences would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world, made by President Ronald Reagan in a speech to the 42nd General Assembly of the United Nations, of course, September 21st, 1987. I can't remember how many times, but I think it may have been as many as 7 times that old Ronnie said almost these exact words to large groups of people. Why on earth is this guy talking about aliens? He's president of the United States. And by the way, with him being a huge Hollywood actor earlier in life, he is the prime example of how politics were completely taken over and the nonsense is now put before you. They're not bad actors running for office and all that stuff. Now we got real actors, big-time actors being the supposed leaders of our country. Started with being the governor of California, of course. UFO Cover-Up Live is a 1988 television program that brought a lot of the ideas of alien visitation back into the spotlight. One of the big discussions is about the Gulf Breeze, Florida sightings that occurred in 1987. There was a huge reveal about supposed government whistleblowers hiding behind shadow filters and altered voices, one of which I found out after I wrote this is probably John Lear, who I'll mention in a few minutes. I saw this when I was a kid and thought it was the coolest freaking thing because I'm a nerd and like Star Trek, so this was awesome when I was 12 or whatever I was at the time. And of course, Stanton Friedman was there too, by the way. Okay. This cat's interesting. Bob Lazar claims he was hired in the 1980s to reverse engineer an engine from extraterrestrial technology. This work was supposed to have occurred at a secret site called S4, a subsidiary installation allegedly located several kilometers south of the United States Air Force facility that is popularly known as Area 51, which I'm sure you've all heard of. In May of 1989, Lazar achieved public notoriety when he appeared in an interview with investigative reporter George Knapp on the Las Vegas TV station KLAS. He used the pseudonym Dennis on that first interview, and his face was hidden, and he discussed his purported employment at S4. Lazar's claims included that the site consisted of concealed aircraft hangars that were built into a mountainside, and that the United States government had 9 craft of unknown origin at the facility. Now, to be very fair, because I try very hard to be objective in anything I look at, if you go out there, it's hard nowadays because they've moved the barriers back many, many miles, but there are plenty of people who did indeed go out to that area and see plenty of weird shit flying around at night. It did happen. I can't say it didn't happen. There's actually plenty of video you could go find if you want to go look. That doesn't mean they're freaking aliens, though. Oops. So he did another interview after that, and from then on, he appeared as himself on camera and would use his real name publicly. Lazar states, the propulsion of the studied vehicle ran on an antimatter reactor, which was fueled by the chemical element with atomic number 115. In the 80s, early 90s, when he was doing his shtick on talk radio, there was no element 115. It has now been synthesized in a lab as one of those barely exists for a nanosecond kind of things, but technically it does exist according to mainstream physicists anyway. So he said that the propulsion system relied on a stable isotope of element 115, which allegedly generates a gravity wave that allowed the vehicle to fly and to evade visual detection by bending light around it. Well, that's convenient. Bob was pretty quiet for many years until a documentary filmmaker brought his story back into the public mindset with the 2018 release, Bob Lazar, Area 51 and Flying Saucers. And he went on the Joe Rogan program, which I think is the #1 podcast in the world. So, of course, a gazillion people heard all of this, and it got people looking into his story all over again. Bob comes off as a nice, quiet, humble guy, and he definitely seems like a super smart dude. He builds like rocket cars and shit like that, which is really cool. But there's, of course, no evidence to back up anything he said. So, it's what it is. Here we are. Best talk show host I've ever heard, sort of. Art Bell was an American broadcaster and author. He was the founder and the original host of both paranormal-themed radio programs, Dreamland and the later Coast to Coast AM. Both were extremely popular, and Coast is still on to this day, having been hosted for many years by his successor, George Norrie. Art Bell is supposedly a Freemason, not that that necessarily means anything. But in his book, here we go again. Will there be a global government with a benevolent dictator overseeing global law, global police, and a global judiciary in an attempt to make the world cleaner, peaceful, and prosperous? If that's what it takes to achieve these ends, so be it. That is from his book, The Quickening, on page 309, and I didn't just pull that from the internet. I went and got the book and looked it up, and that's exactly where it is. So once again, we have another mainstream ufology guy pushing for world government. If it looks like a duck, you finish the rest. Affleck. Richard C. Hoagland is an American author and a proponent of various conspiracy theories about NASA, as well as lost alien civilizations on the moon and throughout the solar system. It is claimed that Hoagland has misappropriated others' professional achievements. The mainstream labels him as a fringe pseudoscientist. His background states that he was the curator of astronomy and space science at the Springfield Science Museum from 1964 to 1967, and assistant director of the Gingras Science Center in West Hartford, Connecticut from 67 to 68. More interestingly, he was also a science advisor for CBS News during the Apollo program. ran from 68 to 71. He made a public name for himself while pushing the idea of ancient alien life and their structural remains left on the moon on Mars and some of the moons of Jupiter and Saturn. He claims that there is a cover-up of this information by NASA and the US government. The common claim, of course. His first big push with all of these ideas was the infamous Base on Mars, originally published by NASA from images that are supposed to have come from the Viking 1 and Viking 2 probes of the 1970s, but we all know about NASA, right? Very valid and credible people there. Okay. Here's John Lear. John Lear was the son of Bill Lear, who invented the Lear jet. It was quite a big deal. He was a distinguished aviator, setting multiple flight records throughout his lifetime. It is well known that he flew cargo planes for the CIA during the Vietnam era, which firmly establishes him as an intelligence operative. So once again, direct ties to the intelligence world, over and over and over again. In the 1980s, he became an outspoken critic of the government for the supposed cover-up of UFOs and the truth about alien contact. He was friends with Bob Lazar and was well acquainted with numerous other figures in the ufology movement. And this dude was quite frequently on with Art Bell and Coast to Coast and all those kinds of programs. And you gotta wonder, so this guy was a massively distinguished aviator, won stupid amounts of awards, just really amazing at what he did, yet he nailed his name firmly to this whole UFO thing that, again, doesn't have any direct evidence. That's weird. Here's a guy who's often overlooked, or especially these days, because he's been dead now for 21 years, but who I actually like a whole lot. Milton William Bill Cooper was an American radio broadcaster and author, known for his 1991 book, Behold a Pale Horse. Bill Cooper started out in the late 1980s speaking in the UFO community about documents he claims to have seen while serving in the military for the Office of Naval Intelligence. So he came right out and said, yes, I was an intelligence operative, and I saw documents. This is what they said, but was also very adamant about what they did not say. And he was very clear on that. This is what they said. But he figured, hypothetically, this is what happened. He figured out that he may have been shown those documents on purpose, so he'd go out with his mouth because they had a psychological profile on him, knowing that he would do such a thing. He later came to the conclusion, and stated this publicly over and over and over again, that the entire UFO and alien narrative was a hoax and was being used to help further the agenda of a one-world government system. Now, I didn't need Bill Cooper to tell me that, because how many things did I show you in the past, however long I've been doing this presentation? How many times did we hear the term one world government? I don't think Bill was wrong. He became quite angry at the thought of being used and spent many years on his program, The Hour of the Time, speaking out against the elite and exposing as much as he could about them. Bill Cooper was murdered in November of 2001 by sheriff's deputies in front of his own home under very suspicious circumstances. The claim was that they were trying to serve an arrest warrant over tax issues. They gunned this guy down, who had spent many years putting out a very excellent program called The Hour of the Time, which I discovered quite a few years ago. And if nothing else, if you want a master's degree on the elite and their symbology and all the history and all that, he did a 40-some part series that he called the Mystery Babylon series. And I've told people this over and over and over again. If you want to really get a great grasp on stuff, find that. There are playlists all over the internet on it. Listen to them in order, because he references things later on. This was extremely well thought out. By the time you get done with it, go back and listen to it again. I promise you, you will understand things in a way you never did before. Alien Autopsy, Fact or Fiction, is a presentation of a 17-minute black and white film that is supposed to depict a secret medical examination or autopsy of an alien by the United States military. It was released in 1995 by London-based entrepreneur Ray Santilli, and was hosted by Star Trek The Next Generation's Jonathan Frakes. It was presented as an authentic autopsy on the body of an alien recovered from the 1947 crash of a flying disc near Roswell, New Mexico. Everybody loves to staple their names to that one, by the way, because that's the one everybody knows. Santilli claimed that the footage was supplied to him by a retired military cameraman who wished to remain anonymous. So in other words, he had no proof, of course. In 2006, Santilli admitted that the film was not authentic, but rather a staged reconstruction of footage he claimed to have viewed in 1992, but which had deteriorated and become unusable. Of course it did. He claimed that a few frames from the original were embedded in his film, but never specified which ones. Nothing to do with this fun little film has ever been verified by anyone ever. In other words, it's bad fiction. But it made a lot of hubbub in the 90s when it came out. Okay. Dr. Stephen Greer is an American medical doctor. He received his medical license in 1989 and worked as an ER physician. He retired in 98 to become a full-time ufologist. Here's another one that I don't have anything against this guy. He comes off as very nice. Again, I don't know any of these people whatsoever. I don't know what to make of him. But he left being an ER doctor, which I'm sure pays pretty damn well, to chase UFOs. He founded the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence and the Disclosure Project, which seeks the disclosure of alleged classified UFO information. Again, I'm not throwing mud at anybody. I don't know this person. It's just, you gotta wonder why people do what they do, what their motivations are. Maybe he had a sighting, which I think he did. It just fascinates him. If that's the truth, okay. I don't have any ill will towards anyone except, speaking of ill will, I do have ill will towards these two shitheads. These are some of the only people I will ever call out in public, and I've done so many times on the air, as total frauds, liars, and hucksters. David Wilcock on the right and Corey Good on the left are two of the worst clowns still trying to wrangle money out of a gullible public with their insane, made-up stories of galactic federations, complete, and I'm not kidding, blue chicken people. They both of them claim these are real people that they're somehow in contact with through channeling. They piss me off. Okay, let's talk about aliens now, because this is kind of the fun part. There are multiple types of aliens that have been reported throughout the decades in alleged encounters. The most common form is some variation of the Greys, with 43% of all alien encounters being of this description. The concept of gray aliens was first mentioned in, a lot of the stuff, and the vast majority of the stuff, as you're gonna see, has a basis in fiction somewhere. So someone is drawing their ideas from somewhere. It was first mentioned in 19th century science fiction. In 1891, the novel Meta, A Tale of the Future was published by Kenneth Follingsby, in which the narrator encountered small gray-skinned aliens with balloon-shaped heads. That was 1891. Somebody made this crap up. In 1893, H.G. Wells, again, H.G. Wells, presented a description of humanity's future appearance in the article, The Man of the Year Million, describing humans as having no mouths, no noses, no hair, and with large heads. In 1895, Wells depicted the Eloi, a successor species to humanity, in similar terms in the novel The Time Machine. It is common for these alien descriptions to have come first from fiction stories. I'm going to show you a couple more. Anybody know that guy? He's actually kind of a nice guy. Another common alien race is the reptilians. They are usually described as tall, scaly humanoids resembling earth lizards of various sorts. Reptilians in humanoid form date back at least as far as ancient Egypt with the crocodile-headed river god Sobek. Oops. The reptilian conspiracy theory was brought into the mainstream by English author David Icke. That was in the 90s. The fictional origin for reptilians is from the original Conan the Barbarian stories from the 1930s, which were written by Robert E. Howard. Howard's serpent men were described as having human bodies and snake heads who were able to imitate humans at will. Well, that sounds really familiar. And who lived in underground passages. Well, that sounds really familiar. And used their shape-changing and mind control abilities to infiltrate humanity. Well, doesn't that sound really familiar in like every stupid thing you hear about reptilians? Ever? And then there's other alien races as well. These include the hybrids, which are supposed to be kind of sort of grays mixed with humans, tall whites, Nordics, dragons, and even praying mantises. The Bible has several different kinds of living beings that aren't human, and some consider Bigfoot sightings as possible alien race as well. All right, and lastly, these are actually my favorite quote-unquote aliens. The Men in Black, or NMIB. There are two variations to the Men in Black sighting. The first are the totally human ones, guys in black suits. But there have been reports of other guys in black suits who don't quite appear human and have odd or alien-like features. The first report of them was in 1947. Boy, they love 1947 apparently. When Harold Dahl claimed to have been warned, "Don't you talk about that UFO that you saw on Murray Island." And of course, there was a man in a dark suit who came and said, "Don't do that." No proof, of course. The second report comes from the mid-1950s when ufologist Albert A. Bender claimed he was visited by men in dark suits who threatened and warned him not to continue investigating UFOs. Bender maintained that the men in black were secret government agents who had been given the task of suppressing evidence of UFOs. Ufologist John Keel claimed to have had encounters with men in black and referred to them as demonic supernatural, with dark skin and or exotic facial features. And of course, there's many more. So maybe the reason there's no evidence is they used the flashy thing on them. Okay, so before I end this, I want to bring up Crow's Law of HD. This is something he came up with a few years ago, and it goes like this. Anything that truly exists that can be filmed in high definition will be filmed in high definition. And what that means is everyone is now walking around in their pocket, just about everyone, with a phone that can make coffee, cook pancakes, and even make a phone call if you're so inclined. They also all have, just about all of them have really good cameras. It's not even HD anymore. A lot of them, mine included, do 4K. So what Crow was getting at here, and it's something to keep in mind when people say they have no evidence of anything that they're claiming. If it's a more recent thing, let's just be fair and say maybe the past 10 years or so, why the hell would you not pull that phone that you know damn well is in your pocket, glued to your hip, and film it? Somebody somewhere must have thought of this, right? And so, what's the bottom line with all of this? Beyond photos and videos, there has never, ever been one shred of physical evidence to definitively prove that there are spacecraft from other worlds with alien occupants visiting Earth. There's also the problem that with modern computer technology, that even photos and videos can be faked as to appear indistinguishable from reality. And that is the problem. You just don't know anymore. You can literally watch a speech by the President of the United States that is 0% real because the technology has gotten that good. And I don't mean Hollywood. You can do it on a new M1 MacBook Air like I have sitting right here, because they're that powerful now. So what is all this stuff? The only thing that I saw linking all of these, as I said a zillion times during this presentation, was that these key players seem to be really hard pushing for a one world government. And I think we all know that that is what they're going for now. These days, of course, they call it the Great Reset, but it's the same bloody thing. Thanks, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If anybody has any questions, I don't know how much time there is. I'd be happy to answer them if there are any. All right, well, thank you so much.